she laughed with her friends. He's too scared of being alone to ever challenge me. I stayed silent but started packing that very evening. What started as casual drinks at Noir, an upscale wine bar in downtown Chicago, became the moment I realized my girlfriend of 2 years saw me as her personal security blanket rather than an equal partner. I'd been working remotely as a cybersecurity specialist for the past 18 months, specializing in blockchain security for financial institutions, which gave me the flexibility to join Hannah and her social circle for their Thursday evening ritual of expensive wine and gossip. The conversation had drifted to another couple in their friend group, Marcus and Kelly, whose messy breakup was apparently the entertainment topic of the week. Kelly was so stupid to challenge Marcus about that Vegas trip, Hannah declared, swirling her $30 glass of Bordeaux like she was conducting an orchestra. She should have known he'd just find someone else who wouldn't give him grief about spending money. Her friend Ashley nodded enthusiastically while adjusting her designer bracelet. Exactly. Men hate confrontation from women. They want peace at home, not drama. That's when Hannah glanced at me with this patronizing smile that made my stomach drop. Trevor gets it. He's too scared of being alone to ever challenge me about anything. It's honestly perfect. The entire table erupted in knowing laughter, like they were sharing some inside joke about my pathetic dependency on their queen bee. I sat there nursing my wine, watching Hannah bask in their approval while they discussed my supposed weakness and fear of abandonment as if I were a well-trained pet sitting obediently beside his owner. He just sits there and lets you do whatever you want, her friend Monica observed with genuine admiration, gesturing toward me like I was an interesting specimen. I wish David was that low maintenance. You've got him so well trained. Hannah preened under the attention, her voice taking on that lecturing tone she used when dispensing relationship advice. It's all about setting the right expectations from the beginning. Trevor knows I'm the social one, the organizer, the decision maker. He handles the boring technical stuff and pays the bills. I handle everything that actually matters in life. The casual dismissal of my career hit differently than usual. These women were discussing my six-figure salary and specialized expertise like it was equivalent to being a particularly useful household appliance. Does he ever get jealous when you go out without him? Ashley asked with obvious curiosity. Or complain about the money you spend? Hannah laughed, that tinkling sound she made when she felt particularly clever. Never. He's too grateful to have someone like me to risk rocking the boat. Besides, he makes good money and has literally nothing else to spend it on. No hobbies, no expensive tastes, no social life without me. The irony hit me like cold water in my face. For 2 years, I'd been funding Hannah's lifestyle, covering her $1,200 rent, groceries that somehow always included organic everything and expensive wine, dinners out at places she chose, shopping sprees for clothes she wore once, and weekend trips to destinations that aligned with her Instagram aesthetic. I'd assumed she appreciated my quiet, supportive nature, not that she interpreted my preference for harmony as desperate codependency rooted in fear and inadequacy. I realized she'd positioned herself as my social lifeline, convincing me that my introverted personality meant I needed her connections and confidence to navigate the world properly, while simultaneously portraying my successful career as boring technical stuff that any competent person could handle. Meanwhile, she'd been systematically undermining my self-worth, making me feel grateful for her attention while treating me like an emotional and financial resource to be managed rather than a partner to be respected and valued. The conversation continued around me, with Hannah's friends offering advice on how to maintain control over their own relationships and sharing stories about training their boyfriends to be more compliant, but I'd stopped listening to their amateur psychology session. Instead, I was methodically calculating the financial reality of our arrangement, mentally reviewing lease agreements, shared expenses, and the surprising amount of money I'd been spending monthly to maintain someone else's social status and lifestyle choices. I thought about my downtown loft with its smart home technology, city views, and premium location that I'd chosen specifically because Hannah loved hosting dinner parties there, and how she'd gradually convinced me that my taste in everything from furniture to restaurants was too boring for someone of her social caliber. By the time we left the wine bar, I'd made a decision that would change both our lives forever, Though Hannah was still laughing about her friend's compliments on her relationship management skills, completely unaware that her perfectly controlled boyfriend was already planning his escape with the same methodical attention to detail that made me successful in cybersecurity. By the time we left the wine bar, I'd made a decision that would change both our lives forever. Though Hannah was still laughing about her friend's compliments on her relationship management skills, completely unaware that her perfectly controlled boyfriend was already planning his escape with the same methodical attention to detail that made me successful in cybersecurity. Within hours of returning home to my downtown loft, I was sitting at my home office setup with my dual monitors and ergonomic workspace, methodically contacting 3 different tech recruiters I'd been politely declining for months, focusing specifically on opportunities in Silicon Valley where my specialized skills in blockchain security were in extremely high demand among companies dealing with cryptocurrency regulations and decentralized finance protocols. I crafted carefully worded, personalized messages explaining that I was suddenly available for immediate relocation and had decided to pursue more challenging opportunities that matched my expertise level and career ambitions, carefully avoiding any mention of personal circumstances while Hannah assumed I was giving her the silent treatment for her public humiliation at the wine bar the previous evening. By Tuesday morning, I had preliminary conversations scheduled with 2 major cryptocurrency startups and a Fortune 500 financial services company, all offering remote interviews that I could conduct from my home office during normal business hours while Hannah was at her boutique job downtown, completely oblivious to the fact that her supposedly dependent boyfriend was systematically dismantling their shared existence and planning his complete disappearance. The first interview went exceptionally well, with the startup's chief technology officer spending 90 minutes explaining their need for someone who could implement advanced blockchain security protocols for their new decentralized finance platform, offering a base salary that was 40% higher than my current position plus significant equity options that could potentially be worth millions if their upcoming initial public offering succeeded as projected by industry analysts. Wednesday brought even better news when the Fortune 500 company's security director called personally to discuss their urgent need for a senior blockchain architect to lead a team of 12 developers working on next-generation cryptocurrency integration for their investment banking division, complete with comprehensive relocation assistance, substantial signing bonus, and stock options that vested immediately rather than following the typical 4-year schedule. I scheduled back-to-back final interviews for Thursday and Friday, using my usual work-from-home setup with professional lighting and my bookshelf background while texting Hannah brief, non-committal responses to her increasingly annoyed messages about my childish behavior and silent treatment, never imagining that I was actually conducting the most important job interviews of my career while she complained about my attitude. Thursday's final interview with the startup lasted 3 hours and included technical assessments, team meetings with their existing security staff, and detailed discussions about their company culture and growth trajectory, with their CEO personally joining the call to express their enthusiasm for bringing someone with my specific expertise onto their leadership team. Friday's interview with the Fortune 500 company was equally impressive, featuring presentations to their executive committee, discussions about their strategic vision for blockchain integration across all their financial products, and a comprehensive tour via video conference of their state-of-the-art Palo Alto campus with its gourmet cafeteria, on-site fitness facilities, and collaborative workspaces designed specifically for their technology teams. By Friday afternoon, I had 2 competing offers sitting in my email inbox, both representing substantial upgrades to my career trajectory and financial situation, along with the geographic distance I needed to completely start over without any possibility of Hannah tracking me down or manipulating me back into our toxic dynamic through mutual friends or social media connections. I accepted the Fortune 500 position after negotiating an immediate start date of the following Monday, a signing bonus that would cover all my relocation expenses plus first year's rent in Palo Alto, and a salary package that represented more money than Hannah had ever imagined I was capable of earning in her consistently dismissive assessment of my boring technical career that apparently required no real skill or intelligence. While Hannah continued sending texts throughout the week ranging from passive-aggressive complaints about my attitude to concerned questions about whether I was having some kind of midlife crisis or work-related breakdown, I was methodically liquidating my Chicago investment portfolio, transferring funds to California banks I'd researched for their high net worth services, and researching corporate housing options in Silicon Valley that would provide immediate accommodation while I searched for permanent housing. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me that Hannah's greatest fear was losing control over someone she viewed as too weak and dependent to ever challenge her authority, while I was simultaneously proving to multiple Fortune 500 companies that I was valuable enough to compete for with substantial financial incentives, leadership opportunities, and career advancement packages that reflected my actual market worth. Throughout this entire process, Hannah demonstrated her complete lack of understanding about my actual capabilities and professional market value, interpreting my quiet focus on work and brief text responses as sulking behavior rather than recognizing that I was orchestrating the most strategic career move of my professional life, effectively doubling my income while putting 2,000 miles between myself and her toxic influence permanently. Throughout this entire process, Hannah demonstrated her complete lack of understanding about my actual capabilities and professional market value, interpreting my quiet focus on work and brief text responses as sulking behavior rather than recognizing that I was orchestrating the most strategic career move of my professional life, effectively doubling my income while putting 2,000 miles between myself and her toxic influence permanently. Monday morning brought the perfect solution when I contacted my older sister Nina and her husband Carlos, a struggling young couple in their late 20s who'd been living in my childhood friend's cramped basement apartment for 8 months while saving every penny for their first home down payment, working double shifts at their respective jobs as a nursing assistant and warehouse supervisor while dealing with the daily stress and embarrassment of their temporary living situation that was straining their marriage and mental health. I offered them my luxury downtown loft as a comprehensive long-term house-sitting arrangement while I traveled extensively for work over the next several years, explaining that I needed someone completely trustworthy to maintain the property, handle any building maintenance issues, manage mail and packages, and keep the place lived in and secure during my extended absence for this incredible career opportunity. Nina and Carlos were overwhelmed by the generous offer, nearly crying with relief during our video call as they described how desperate and depressed they'd become living in their friend's basement with no privacy, extremely limited storage space for their belongings, and constant tension about overstaying their welcome while their friend's girlfriend complained about the crowded living conditions and utility costs. I walked them through every aspect of the loft during a detailed video tour, showing them the smart home technology system with voice-controlled lighting and temperature, the fully equipped gourmet kitchen with professional-grade stainless steel appliances, wine refrigerator, and granite countertops, the panoramic views of Lake Michigan from the floor-to-ceiling windows that Hannah had always used as backdrops for her Instagram photos, and the building's extensive luxury amenities including a rooftop deck with outdoor kitchen, state-of-the-art fitness center, resident lounge, and 24-hour concierge service that Hannah had always treated as her personal staff for handling deliveries and reservations. While Nina and Carlos marveled at the incredible generosity and asked repeatedly if I was absolutely certain about such an amazing offer that seemed too good to be true, I was simultaneously and methodically packing Hannah's extensive wardrobe, makeup collection, designer shoes, jewelry, perfumes, skincare products, and personal belongings into professional moving boxes I'd ordered online, carefully cataloging every single item and organizing everything by category with the same meticulous attention to detail I applied to cybersecurity protocols and risk assessment procedures. I arranged for a premium climate-controlled storage facility across town that specialized in protecting valuable items, prepaid for 2 full years of storage fees using my signing bonus money, and created a comprehensive digital inventory list with photographs of every item I packed, ensuring that Hannah would receive absolutely everything she'd accumulated during our relationship without any possibility of claiming I'd stolen, hidden, or damaged her possessions out of spite, revenge, or financial manipulation. The packing process required 3 full days of methodical work during Hannah's boutique hours downtown, during which she continued sending increasingly confused and slightly worried texts about my distant behavior, strange new schedule, and apparent obsession with work projects, completely unaware that I was literally and systematically erasing her entire presence from my living space while she spent her days selling overpriced designer clothing to wealthy suburban women. I had the locks changed by a professional locksmith who specialized in high-security systems, updated all my addresses and emergency contacts with banks, credit card companies, insurance providers, subscription services, and professional associations, methodically removing any trace of Hannah's access to my financial accounts, building amenities, mail forwarding, or personal information while she remained completely oblivious to the comprehensive scope of my departure preparations. The most personally satisfying part was preparing a detailed, professionally written letter explaining my decision with the calm, objective tone I used for technical documentation and client reports, outlining my choice to end our relationship permanently, providing the storage facility's address and access codes, and including a cashier's check covering 2 full years of what she'd actually contributed to our shared household expenses, which I'd calculated down to the penny. I researched the exact amount she'd genuinely contributed over our entire 2-year relationship, including her occasional $50 grocery runs for organic produce and expensive wine, her portion of utilities she'd insisted on splitting despite using significantly more electricity for her hair styling tools, hot water for extended showers, and internet bandwidth for constant social media streaming, then deliberately doubled the calculated amount to ensure she couldn't possibly accuse me of being petty, vindictive, or financially abusive about money. Nina and Carlos eagerly agreed to move in the following Saturday morning, which perfectly aligned with my departure timeline, and I spent several hours creating detailed written instructions for operating the smart home system, understanding building policies and procedures, local recommendations for grocery stores and restaurants that delivered, contact information for building management and maintenance staff, and even suggestions for the best coffee shops and entertainment venues in the neighborhood that they could now afford to enjoy. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather and flawless execution as professional movers arrived at 7:30 sharp to pack my essential belongings into a climate-controlled truck while Nina and Carlos simultaneously pulled up in their battered Honda Civic with everything they owned crammed into garbage bags and cardboard boxes, their faces glowing with excitement and disbelief at their incredible change of fortune. I walked them through the building's amenities one final time, introducing them to Marcus, the friendly weekend concierge who'd been dealing with Hannah's demands for 2 years, and watched his genuine smile as I explained that Nina and Carlos would be the new long-term residents who actually appreciated excellent service rather than treating staff like personal assistants. The contrast was immediately obvious as Nina thanked Marcus profusely for basic information about package delivery while Carlos asked thoughtful questions about building policies and neighborhood safety, demonstrating the kind of respectful behavior that would make them beloved residents rather than entitled problems for the management staff to endure. I handed them the updated keys, building access cards, and a comprehensive welcome package I'd assembled containing local restaurant menus, emergency contact numbers, Wi-Fi passwords, and a detailed guide to the smart home system that had taken me months to perfect with all its automated lighting, temperature controls, and security features. The final gesture was leaving that bottle of Dom Perignon champagne in the refrigerator with a handwritten note expressing my genuine gratitude for their help and welcoming them to what I hoped would become their permanent home, knowing that their appreciation and joy would fill the space with positive energy that had been lacking during Hannah's residency. By noon, my Tesla was loaded with everything I needed for my new life in California, while Nina and Carlos were already arranging their modest furniture in the luxury space, marveling at the lake views and taking selfies on the balcony like tourists who'd won the lottery, completely unaware that they were part of my strategic exit plan. I drove straight through to Palo Alto, stopping only for gas and brief meals, while monitoring Hannah's increasingly frantic texts that evolved from annoyed complaints about my continued silence to worried questions about my whereabouts and whether something terrible had happened to me during my supposed work crisis. The building's concierge held my carefully prepared farewell letter with strict instructions to deliver it only to Hannah personally when she arrived looking for me, along with the storage unit key, access codes, and detailed directions to retrieve all her belongings that I'd methodically packed and preserved. Marcus had my explicit instructions to remain professional but firm, explaining only that I'd relocated for work and left comprehensive information for her to collect her possessions, refusing to provide any additional details about my destination, timeline, or contact information regardless of how emotional or demanding her response became. By Saturday evening, I was settling into my furnished corporate apartment in Palo Alto, unpacking my clothes and setting up my home office equipment while enjoying the California sunshine streaming through windows that faced west toward the Pacific Ocean instead of east toward Lake Michigan and all the toxic memories associated with that view. The timing was absolutely perfect as I prepared to begin my new six-figure position the following Monday morning, working with a team of brilliant developers on cutting-edge blockchain technology that would challenge my skills and advance my career in ways that Hannah had never understood or appreciated during her dismissive assessments of my boring technical work. Hannah's texts continued throughout my drive, ranging from passive-aggressive comments about my immature behavior to increasingly desperate pleas for communication, but I'd already disabled read receipts and planned to change my phone number entirely once I established California residency and completed my corporate onboarding process. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me that while Hannah had been confidently explaining to her friends how I was too scared of being alone to ever challenge her control, I was actually demonstrating the kind of strategic thinking and decisive action that had made me successful in cybersecurity, applying those same analytical skills to completely restructure my personal life without her knowledge or consent. That first night in California, I fell asleep in my new apartment listening to unfamiliar sounds of Silicon Valley traffic instead of Chicago sirens, knowing that Hannah would discover my departure within days but would have no way to contact me, track me down, or manipulate me back into our toxic dynamic that had been slowly destroying my self-worth and financial stability for 2 years. That first night in California, I fell asleep in my new apartment listening to unfamiliar sounds of Silicon Valley traffic instead of Chicago sirens, knowing that Hannah would discover my departure within days but would have no way to contact me, track me down, or manipulate me back into our toxic dynamic that had been slowly destroying my self-worth and financial stability for 2 years. 2 weeks after my departure, Hannah finally visited the downtown loft building after her increasingly desperate texts and voicemails went completely unanswered, assuming I was hiding inside having some kind of breakdown or punishing her with an extended silent treatment that she could eventually manipulate me out of with the right combination of tears, seduction, and emotional manipulation tactics that had worked successfully throughout our relationship. Marcus, the weekend concierge who'd grown genuinely tired of Hannah's entitled attitude and demanding behavior over the past 2 years, handed her my carefully prepared letter with professional courtesy, along with the storage unit key, detailed access codes, and a comprehensive map to the climate-controlled facility where I'd methodically preserved every single item she'd ever brought to my apartment. Hannah's hands visibly trembled as she read my calm, methodical explanation of my permanent departure, my new career opportunity that she'd never understood or appreciated, and my final decision to end our relationship completely, the devastating reality of my meticulous planning and strategic execution finally beginning to sink in as she realized this wasn't a temporary tantrum, negotiating tactic, or punishment that she could overcome with her usual emotional manipulation strategies. The letter included a substantial cashier's check representing exactly double what she'd actually contributed to our shared household expenses over our entire 2-year relationship, calculated down to the penny and deliberately generous to prevent any possible accusations of financial abuse while simultaneously making it crystal clear that I'd been subsidizing her entire luxury lifestyle without receiving genuine appreciation, reciprocal support, or basic respect in return. She raced across town to the storage facility in her leased BMW, frantically using the access codes I'd provided to discover her entire material existence neatly organized in premium climate-controlled units, every designer dress, expensive makeup palette, skincare product, jewelry piece, and personal photograph carefully packed and labeled with the same meticulous attention to detail I applied to cybersecurity risk assessment and threat analysis protocols. The sight of her possessions arranged so systematically and professionally must have been psychologically devastating, providing undeniable proof that my departure wasn't impulsive, emotional, or reactive but had been strategically planned and executed over several weeks while she'd been obliviously shopping, posting Instagram stories about dealing with moody boyfriends, and confidently explaining to her friends how I was too scared of being alone to ever challenge her authority. Hannah desperately attempted to contact me through every possible digital and social channel, Quickly discovering that my phone number had been completely disconnected, my social media accounts had been systematically deactivated, and my professional email address bounced back with automated corporate messages indicating that the user was no longer with the organization and no forwarding information was available. She tried calling my former company directly multiple times, only to learn that I'd officially resigned weeks earlier and left absolutely no forwarding contact information, with strict HR policies preventing them from sharing any details about my departure timeline, reasons, or future plans regardless of her increasingly frantic claims to be my deeply concerned girlfriend dealing with a family emergency or medical crisis. Her attempts to reach me through our limited mutual friends proved equally futile, as I'd carefully avoided mentioning my relocation plans to anyone in our Chicago social circle, maintaining the kind of operational security and information compartmentalization that would have impressed my cybersecurity colleagues while effectively protecting my new California life from Hannah's inevitable attempts at manipulation, guilt-tripping, and forced reconciliation. The full scope of my strategic disappearance became painfully clear when Hannah realized she had virtually no knowledge about my family background, childhood history, or personal connections outside of Chicago, never having shown genuine interest in my upbringing, values, or life experiences beyond how my substantial income could fund her expensive lifestyle and social activities designed to impress her equally shallow friend group. Hannah's initial rage at being abandoned without warning gradually gave way to genuine panic and financial terror as she confronted the harsh economic reality of losing her primary source of income, suddenly facing the prospect of personally covering her own rent, car payment, insurance premiums, grocery bills, and entertainment expenses on her part-time boutique salary that barely covered basic necessities even with careful budgeting. The generous cashier's check I'd provided would theoretically cover several months of her drastically reduced lifestyle, but the psychological impact of losing her reliable financial safety net was absolutely devastating to someone who'd built her entire identity and self-worth around being attractive enough to secure and retain a successful provider who would fund her material aspirations without question or resentment. Without my substantial financial support covering her rent, dining expenses, shopping sprees, and entertainment budget, Hannah could no longer afford the designer lifestyle, exclusive restaurant reservations, expensive cocktails, and lavish social activities that had kept her superficial friend group engaged and impressed with her seemingly successful romantic situation. Her carefully curated social circle began gradually distancing themselves as Hannah moved between their couches like a desperate nomad, becoming increasingly bitter, demanding, and emotionally unstable about her sudden change in circumstances while refusing to acknowledge her role in creating the toxic dynamic that drove me away permanently. She started borrowing money from Ashley, Monica, and her other wine bar companions, initially claiming it was temporary assistance while she sorted out some banking issues related to my sudden departure, but her friends quickly grew tired of her entitled attitude and constant financial requests that never seemed to come with realistic repayment plans. The expensive Thursday evening wine ritual at Noir became impossible to maintain on her boutique salary, forcing Hannah to suggest cheaper alternatives that her image-conscious friends found beneath their social status, effectively excluding her from the very social circle where she'd publicly humiliated me and declared her complete control over our relationship dynamic. Hannah created increasingly elaborate and contradictory stories about my departure, initially telling people I'd suffered a mental breakdown and abandoned all my responsibilities like a coward, then switching to claims that I'd been secretly planning to leave for months while manipulating her emotions and wasting her time during the prime years of her dating life. Her narrative continuously evolved as she tried to maintain her victim status and social credibility, but the stories fell apart when people realized she was essentially homeless, broke, and had no means of contacting the man she claimed had been obsessively dependent on her approval and terrified of being alone. Friends and acquaintances began asking pointed questions about what she'd actually contributed to our relationship beyond her physical presence, forcing Hannah to confront the uncomfortable reality that she'd brought nothing meaningful to the partnership while expecting to be supported like a kept woman in exchange for occasional intimacy and social validation. She spent countless hours researching private investigators and considering hiring them to track me down across the country, never suspecting that I was thriving in Silicon Valley with a prestigious new position, substantial salary increase, and the kind of professional recognition she'd always dismissed as boring technical work that required no real intelligence or skill. Hannah's social media presence became increasingly desperate and transparent, with posts about knowing your worth, toxic men who can't handle strong women, and inspirational quotes about overcoming betrayal, but the comments revealed how obvious her situation had become to everyone who'd witnessed our relationship dynamic. Her followers began questioning why such a supposedly successful and desirable woman was suddenly posting about financial struggles, failed relationships, and the difficulty of starting over, with some former friends privately messaging each other about Hannah's obvious gold-digging behavior that had finally backfired spectacularly. The most psychologically devastating aspect of her situation was the growing realization that her entire lifestyle and identity had been built on my financial foundation, leaving her with no genuine skills, meaningful career prospects, or authentic relationships that weren't based on transactional social climbing and material benefits. Hannah's desperate attempts to recreate our relationship dynamic with other men proved futile, as her obvious desperation, financial neediness, and bitter attitude toward her previous relationship made her an unattractive prospect for the kind of successful men she felt entitled to date and financially depend upon for lifestyle maintenance. 2 months after my departure, Hannah decided to make her grand gesture at what she still believed was my downtown loft. Having spent weeks crafting the perfect emotional speech about forgiveness, second chances, and how our love was stronger than pride or misunderstandings, convinced that I was hiding somewhere in Chicago waiting for her to rescue our relationship with the right combination of vulnerability and seduction. She arrived at the luxury building on a Saturday afternoon wearing her most flattering dress and carrying a handwritten letter she'd revised dozens of times, prepared to apologize for her wine bar comments while simultaneously explaining how my abandonment had taught her to appreciate what we'd built together over 2 years. Nina answered the door with genuine confusion when she encountered this tearful stranger asking for Trevor, her face showing polite concern as she tried to understand why someone was looking for her brother at what had clearly become her and Carlos's permanent home for the past 2 months. "I'm sorry, but Trevor doesn't live here anymore," Nina explained with characteristic kindness, her voice carrying the cheerful tone of someone who'd recently experienced a dramatic improvement in their living situation. "He moved to California months ago for an amazing job opportunity with some big tech company. This is our place now." Hannah's carefully constructed worldview began crumbling as she processed this information, realizing that I hadn't just temporarily left her or moved across town to punish her behavior, but had completely replaced our entire shared life with something infinitely better for people I actually cared about and respected. The devastating truth hit her like physical impact as she understood that I'd given away the luxury lifestyle she'd considered her rightful domain to my struggling sister and brother-in-law, treating them with the generosity and consideration she'd taken for granted while contributing nothing meaningful to our relationship. "California?" Hannah managed to whisper, her voice breaking as the full scope of my departure became clear. "He never mentioned California. We were together for 2 years. He would have told me if he was planning something that major." Nina's expression shifted to gentle sympathy as she realized she was delivering life-altering news to someone who'd clearly been left completely in the dark. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew." He seemed really excited about the new position, something about blockchain security for a Fortune 500 company. The signing bonus was incredible, and they provided corporate housing in Palo Alto while he apartment hunts. The final devastating blow came when Carlos appeared behind Nina, carrying their toddler nephew who was visiting for the weekend, and cheerfully added his perspective about their incredible good fortune and my obvious happiness with his new California lifestyle. "Trevor's the most generous person we know," Carlos said with genuine gratitude radiating from his voice. "We were living in a friend's basement, and he just offered us this amazing place like it was nothing. We video chat every week, and he sounds so happy and relaxed now. Finally found a job that really challenges him and pays what he's worth." Hannah stood frozen in the doorway, watching this happy family scene in what had been our shared space, realizing that I'd effortlessly created more joy and appreciation in 2 months with Nina and Carlos than she'd generated during our entire relationship despite all my financial support and emotional investment. The luxury loft that she'd treated as her personal stage for Instagram photos and dinner parties had become a genuine home for people who valued the opportunity and treated it as the incredible gift it represented rather than an expected entitlement. "I need to reach him," Hannah said desperately, her voice taking on the demanding tone that had driven me away initially. "This is all a misunderstanding. We had a fight, but we can work it out. Do you have his new number?" Nina and Carlos exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing the desperation and entitlement in Hannah's demeanor that probably explained why I'd made such a clean break from my Chicago life without looking back or leaving forwarding information. "I'm really sorry, but Trevor specifically asked us not to share his contact information with anyone from Chicago," Nina explained diplomatically. "He said he needed a fresh start and didn't want any connections to his old life while he focused on his career transition." Hannah walked away from the building in stunned silence, her grand reconciliation speech forgotten as she finally understood that I hadn't needed her strength, support, or social connections to thrive, but had actually been held back by her toxic influence and financial dependency that had made me feel grateful for scraps of affection while funding her entire existence. The crushing realization that I'd never been too scared of being alone to challenge her, but had simply been too kind and patient to immediately leave someone who treated me like a personal ATM rather than an equal partner, left her completely shattered and facing a future she'd never prepared for or imagined possible.